The text arrived Monday afternoon, like a punch to the gut, as I sat in my office buried in heavy folders, trying to grasp the gist of yet another complex case. My phone sat on my desk, cold and silent, until it lit up with the message. I read it once, then again, and the world around me swam. Mom, Dad, and I just talked. Your brother's boss, Judge Harold Brennan of the Ninth Circuit, will be at my retirement party on Saturday. This is important for Marcus's career. Your presence will raise questions we'd rather not answer. Do you understand? Did I understand? Oh, yes. I understood all too well. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred, trying to clear the lump in my throat. Marcus, my brilliant, flawless brother, a federal prosecutor, a golden boy whose mere existence made our parents beam with pride. And me? I was a quiet, awkward question, best hidden. My fingers trembled as I typed the reply. Understood. No argument, no explanation, just accepted. What else was there to do? A minute later, as if finishing me off, came the second one. My mother's voice, filtering through the text. Your father explained about Saturday. Perhaps that's for the best, dear. Judge Brennan is a highly respected man. You know how meticulous these judges are about decorum. And then, the hero of the occasion himself, my brother. Marcus, look, I know this party is awkward, but Judge Brennan is very old-fashioned when it comes to professional image. Dad thinks it's best to limit it to immediate family and fellow lawyers. I hope you understand. I understand, Marcus. I understand perfectly. I tossed the phone aside as if it had burned my fingers and slammed my palms down on the edge of the table. The air in the office grew thick and stuffy. I needed to breathe. I needed to focus. In front of me lay the lawsuit, a thick folder marked United States versus Castellano. RICO. Fraud. Money laundering. Intimidation. My lifeline to reality. Because outside of that folder, I was just Sophia, doing something legal for the government. And here, on that cover page, beneath the dry, Gothic script, it read, United States District Court, Southern District of New York. Presiding Judge, Sophia Martinez. My courtroom, my case, my law. They didn't know, or didn't want to know. I once tried to explain to my father what a federal appointment was. He nodded, his gaze already wandering somewhere in the past, where Marcus had won his first award at Harvard. A stable job, he said. Not as exciting as Marcus's, but someone has to do the paperwork. My mother added something worriedly about benefits. After that, I stopped trying. My silence became armor, and work became the only world where my voice carried weight, where my decisions mattered. The presidential nomination, the Senate vote, the 40 under 40 lists, I kept all of it to myself, like a secret garden where my family never set foot. It was mine, only mine. And on Thursday, the law was supposed to take on special significance. On Tuesday morning, I immersed myself again in the Castellano case, rereading the indictment. The lead prosecutor was Marcus Chin. His deputy was Jennifer Okafor. The names lined the lines, like a verdict. He didn't know. How could he have known? To him, I was Sophia Chin. I had taken my mother's last name, Martinez, deliberately, wanting to separate myself, to create my own space where I wouldn't be judged in comparison to him. A knock on the door pulled me out of my thoughts. My assistant, Patricia, peered out. Judge Martinez, the prosecution team is here for a preliminary conference. My heart was pounding somewhere in my temples. Invite them in. The door opened, and he entered first. Marcus. Not my brother, but federal prosecutor Marcus Chin, confident, polished, in a perfectly tailored suit. He was explaining something to his team, not even looking forward. Judge Martinez has a reputation for being a strict judge, so we need to be impeccable. The voice I'd known since childhood now rang in my office with a respectful tone. What reputation exactly? I asked, looking up from the paperwork. He looked up. Time stood still. I saw his confidence crack and crumble in those 3 seconds it took him to process it. His sister, at that bench, in the black robe of authority he so revered. The professional mask tightened, but the crack was visible. Your Honor, Marcus Chin, Assistant U.S. Attorney. Mr. Chin, please be seated. My voice was flat, icy. I felt his gaze glued to me, trying to piece together a puzzle that wouldn't fit. I spent the conference on autopilot. Schedules, motions, procedures. The words flowed, memorized over the years. Mr. Chin, I understand this is a complex RICO case. What is the expected time frame for its resolution? 4 to 6 weeks, Your Honor. We have extensive financial reports and 18 witnesses. His voice was collected, but his eyes were stormy. When all the formalities were exhausted, I paused. Mr. Chin, a word before you go. The team left, casting puzzled glances at him. The door closed, leaving us in a thick silence. He stood as if on a hot floor. You may sit. He sank into a chair, stiffly. Do you think there's a conflict of interest? I asked first, breaking the ice. He swallowed. Your Honor, there isn't one. We're not close. We haven't been for many years. I can be impartial, but if you feel it necessary to file a motion to recuse— Are you sure? I interrupted. Because once we start, there's no turning back. This is your most high-profile trial. He shook his head slowly, and his gaze betrayed something beyond shock. Bewilderment, almost embarrassment. No motion, I'm sure. He fell silent, clenching and unclenching his fingers. Sophia, Your Honor, I didn't know. I had no idea. I know, I answered simply. How long? 3 years. His face twisted in genuine surprise. 3 years, and you didn't say anything. I did, I snapped coldly, at Thanksgiving. Dad then turned the conversation to your internship at the Supreme Court. Mom asked if I had a good pension. He winced, as if in sudden pain. I don't remember that. I know. That's why I stopped. A heavy silence filled the room. But a federal judge, it's a Senate confirmation. That's what you'd notice, he finally exhaled. I looked straight at him, feeling the old, familiar bitterness well up inside me. Marcus, it's okay. I've long since come to terms with being overlooked. He glanced up at me, and for the first time, something vaguely resembling shame flickered in them. You're overlooked? His voice broke. You're a federal judge. To the legal community, yes. To our family, I'm a daughter who handles government papers, I said, and the words hung in the silence of the office, bitter and final. I leaned back in my chair, feeling the cool leather upholstery seep through the thin fabric of my blouse. The trial begins Thursday. In that courtroom, I am Judge Martinez, and you are Mr. Chin. Our personal history is irrelevant. Understood? He nodded, unable to meet my gaze. I see. And Marcus? About Saturday's retirement party. He had the tact to at least look ashamed, his gaze falling on the polished table. Dad actually said that. Check the shared family chat. He was quite clear about my presence being a disgrace in front of the judges. Oh my God, Sophia. His voice was choked, as if he were being strangled. It's fine, I snapped, feeling a strange, empty lightness. I'm still not coming. I have lawsuits to review. Mountains of cases that had always been my true home, my refuge. He rose slowly, hesitating in his chair, as if expecting some other ending. Honestly, I should have paid more attention. To your career. To everything. Yes, I should have, I agreed, without a hint of malice. Regret was a belated guest. But I didn't pay attention, and we're both fine. See you Thursday, attorney. He left, quietly closing the door behind him. The echoing silence that followed was thicker than any noise. I sat alone, and my gaze fell on the elegant cream invitation leaning against the bookshelf. It had arrived 2 weeks ago. Join us in honor of Thomas Chen's 40 years of service at Franklin and Morrison Accounting, Saturday, November 16th, 7 p.m., University Club, evening dress code, confirmation required. At the bottom, in small print, were the special guests, Judge Harold Brennan, senior partners from prestigious firms, a congressman. All this carefully curated entourage of success, compared to which I, their daughter, would have been a blot, an awkward question in an elegant evening gown. Dad wanted to show off his legacy, his golden son, the prosecutor, and I was that piece of truth that needed to be hidden in the archives. I pulled out my phone. My fingers automatically typed a message to my law clerk, James, a brilliant and all-knowing man. Me, what's Judge Brennan's reputation? The reply came almost instantly. James, Ninth Circuit, old-fashioned conservative, tough on defendants, loves it when prosecutors are prepared down to the last detail. But interesting. He's at some retirement party on Saturday. I heard him mention it to his clerk in the cafeteria. I smiled, a dry, joyless movement of my lips. Of course he'd be there. Thursday arrived cold and piercingly clear, as if the weather itself had delivered its verdict. I donned my black robe, my second skin, my armor. I pulled my hair back into a tight bun and ran my eyes over my notes one last time. The Castellano case waited, like a complex, dangerous machine waiting to be set in motion. At 8:55, I entered courtroom 7A. The hubbub of voices died down when the bailiff announced, "Everyone, please rise." I walked to my dais, feeling the weight of hundreds of eyes on me. "Please be seated." My gaze swept the courtroom, the press, the stone-faced defendants. At the prosecution table sat Marcus, collected and sharp as a blade. And in the second row, distinguished by his gray temples and dignified posture, sat Judge Harold Brennan. I saw Marcus notice him, his shoulders instinctively square, his chin lift. This was his test, his day. "Good morning," my voice rang out, clear and even, filling the space. "The case is United States v. Castellano. Mr. Chin, is the government ready?" "Yes, Your Honor." For the next 4 hours, I orchestrated the complex symphoria of jury selection. Questions, challenges, decisions. I was the center around which everything revolved. Efficient, flawless, cool. At noon, returning to my office, I found Patricia agitated. "Judge Martinez, Judge Brennan would like to introduce himself. He's waiting." I removed my robe, remaining in my formal suit. "Invite him in." He entered, the embodiment of the judicial establishment. His handshake was firm, his gaze appraising. "Judge Martinez, I hope I'm not intruding. Your handling of the trial is impressive." "Thank you. Please have a seat." He took the same chair. "I'm in town for a celebration and thought I'd drop in. It's a serious matter. Marcus Chin is a talent. I supervised his internship. A brilliant mind. He's well prepared." He paused, a note of approval creeping into his voice. "I'll attend his father's retirement party on Saturday. Marcus speaks very fondly of his family." My face remained impassive. "Thomas is very proud of him." "And with good reason," Brennan nodded. Then he inclined his head slightly. "I don't think Marcus has any brothers or sisters." The question hung in the air, poignant and deliberate. "I think he has a sister," I said cautiously, feeling something tighten inside. Is she legal, too?" "She works with the courts. Paralegal, court administrator, something like that," I said, using his words, my father's words, and they burned my throat. Brennan nodded, satisfied. "Well, Thomas mentioned he wanted to keep the evening intimate, lawyers and close family. I'm guessing his sister won't be coming. Perhaps a scheduling conflict." "Perhaps," echoed in my chest. We talked for another 15 minutes about law, about precedent. His mind was sharp, impeccable. As he was leaving, he turned at the threshold. "Judge Martinez, you're doing an excellent job. The court needs judges like you. How long have you been on the bench?" 3 years, a presidential appointment. Senate confirmation, that must have been a challenge. The process was thorough, I confirmed. He smiled, and genuine respect flickered in his eyes. "Well, the robe suits you. I look forward to the rest of the trial." The door closed. I sat in stony silence, motionless. Marcus didn't just remain silent. He erased me. For a man whose opinion meant everything to him, he reduced me to a ghost, an insignificant detail in the family's background. This wasn't blindness. This was deliberate destruction. and it burned no longer with resentment, but with the cold, pure flame of something else entirely. I remained motionless for another minute, staring at the empty chair where Brennan had just sat. The air in the office still seemed to vibrate with his last words. Then, slowly, precisely, I took out my phone. My fingers were cold, but my movements were precise. Me, James, get the transcript of my Senate confirmation hearing. I need my opening statement. James, right now. 10 minutes later, he brought over a thin blue folder. I opened it to page 4. The paper smelled of archival dust and the past. And there, in the official transcripts, were the words I spoke 3 years ago, alone in that wooden chair under the scrutiny of the committee. Senator Williams, Judge Martinez, your path to this position is remarkable. The daughter of immigrants, first generation to graduate from college, Yale Law School on a full scholarship, an internship with Judge Reynolds, a distinguished career in the U.S. Attorney's Office before this appointment. Your family must be incredibly proud. Sophia Martinez, Senator, my family has always supported me in their own way, but this achievement is mine. I built it with hard work, not family ties, and it's an honor to serve. I remembered that courtroom. I remembered the cold metal of the microphone beneath my fingers. I remembered my gaze sliding across the empty family section. Marcus was questioning a witness in a drug case, which he'd proudly told me the day before. My parents had a long-planned cruise. Can't cancel, dear. Only Judge Reynolds, my mentor, gray and stern, sat in the front row. He nodded to me as the votes were counted. 94-3. Affirmative. My victory, their absence. Meanwhile, the trial moved forward with flawless, almost brutal efficiency. Marcus was brilliant. He presented financial evidence like a virtuoso, distilling a complex money laundering scheme into simple, damning facts. $47 million, 18 shell companies, wiretaps, voices hoarse with threats. He was magnificent. And Judge Brennan watched his every move, every day, taking notes in his notepad. On Friday afternoon, after a particularly powerful cross-examination that Marcus conducted like a surgical operation, Brennan approached me again during a recess. Judge Martinez, wonderful handling of the trial. You've got both sides in a tight grip. Thank you, Judge Brennan. Marcus Chin is performing brilliantly. His father must be bursting with pride. A new, strange note crept into his voice, one that hadn't been there before. I'm sure he is, I responded neutrally. I'm looking forward to tomorrow's celebration. Thomas has done well. 40 years of steady work and a son who will become a major figure. Sounds like a significant celebration. He paused, his gaze intense and searching. Although I confess, I'm curious about something. Yes, sister. Marcus mentioned the one who works with the courts. I asked Thomas about her last night at dinner, and he was evasive. He said she does administrative legal work and is very quiet, that she wouldn't come on Saturday because she wouldn't fit in with the lawyers. I remained silent, letting the silence swell between us. I thought that was odd, he continued softly but insistently. If she works with the courts, you'd think she'd be comfortable around lawyers. Some people prefer to stay in the shadows, I said, my own words ringing with bitter irony. True. He didn't look away. Judge Martinez, forgive the personal question, but are you married? Do you have children? No, sir. Her maiden name is Martinez, he drawled. It's my mother's maiden name. I hired her for professional work. And before that, I looked up and met his gaze, direct and unwavering. Chin. I watched the gears click in his mind. His keen, legal mind connected the dots. Martinez the mother, Chin the father, the sister they were ashamed of. His face transformed. Curiosity gave way to stunned understanding, and then to something hard and dark, like anger that had been pent up for a long time and had just found its object. Sophia Chin, he breathed quietly. Marcus's sister. Yes. You're the sister who does administrative legal work. That's how they describe me, I confirmed, my voice surprisingly calm. You're a federal district judge. Yes, sir. Brennan sank heavily into the chair opposite, as if all his strength had suddenly deserted him. How long? 3 years. And your family, they don't know. They know I'm a lawyer working for the government. They never asked more than that. But a federal judge is public record. Presidential appointment, Senate confirmation. They never bothered to do a basic search? His voice was thick with disbelief. Marcus didn't know he was prosecuting his own sister. He knows now. I told him on Tuesday. Before that, no. Brennan's face was contorted with a fluctuating array of emotions: disappointment, disgust, determination. And tomorrow's party. They told you not to come because you'd embarrass them in front of me. Something like that, yes. Because who do they think you are? A law clerk? A paralegal? His voice rose in indignation. Yes, they never cared enough to ask for details. Brennan stood abruptly and paced the office, his shadow flitting across the walls. Sophia, may I call you Sophia? Here, in the office. Yes. This is outrageous. He stopped and turned to me. Your brother has spent the last week telling me about his legal heritage, his Harvard degree, his internship. He's pretending to be the only legal luminary in the family. He's not lying. He's a brilliant lawyer, I said, and it was true. But he erased you, completely, and your parents condoned it. His words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. They see what they want to see. This is unacceptable. His tone became steely, the same tone his verdicts must have sounded. Sophia, you are one of the most impressive lawyers I've seen in years. Your presence in this courtroom is commanding. You were confirmed 94-3. Do you realize how rare that is? I'm aware. And your family thinks you're filing papers. Yes. He shook his head, a cold light in his eyes. I'll be at that party tomorrow, and I intend to tell Thomas Chin who his daughter really is. Judge Brennan, that's not necessary, I tried to protest, but I felt the protest sound weak. Absolutely necessary. Marcus took advantage of my mentorship. Fine, but he did it while pretending his sister didn't exist in the profession. That ends tomorrow. Sir, I don't need you to fight this battle. No, I don't, but I'll do it anyway, because this is more than just family dynamics. It's a matter of professional integrity. Marcus presented himself a certain way. The truth is quite different, and that matters. On Saturday night, I stayed home, exactly as promised. I put on some old, soft joggers and a t-shirt, ordered some spicy Thai noodles, and uncorked a bottle of the expensive California Cabernet I'd been saving for a special occasion. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. My special occasion was happening without me, a few miles away, within the luxurious confines of the University Club, and I was enjoying the silence. At 7:15 p.m., the silence was broken by vibration for the first time. My phone bounced on the table as if alive. I glanced at the screen. Marcus. Sophia, what the? Marcus, Brennan just told Dad you're a federal judge. Marcus, everyone's in shock. Marcus, call me right now. The message was garbled, his grammar shattered, as was his composure. I pictured the scene, crystal glasses, the polite murmur of voices, and then that bang. I lifted my finger from the screen, silenced the phone, and set it aside. I went back to the noodles. They were scaldingly hot, and it felt good. It was a feeling I could recognize. At 8:47 p.m., the phone came to life again, dancing desperately across the wooden countertop. This time, Dad. Dad, Sophia, Judge Brennan says you're a federal district judge. Is that true? Honey, why didn't you tell us? Judge Brennan's telling everyone you were appointed by the president. Marcus, Dad's panicking. Brennan asked him in front of everyone why his daughter wasn't at the legal achievement party when she was one of the youngest federal judges in the country. Dad, we need to talk. This is really awkward. Very awkward. Yes, it must have been terribly awkward. I imagined his face, accustomed to a proud, reserved smile, contorted with confusion and a kind of childish fear. I poured myself more wine. The ruby-red liquid caught the lamplight. I drank. It was deep, with notes of dark berries and a long, bitter finish. At 9:23 p.m., the phone finally rang. A ring. I watched the screen glow and vibrate, counting down the seconds until it went to voicemail. Then I put it on speakerphone. My father's voice rang in my quiet kitchen, tense, muffled, full of genuine stress. "Sophia, this is very awkward. Judge Brennan is here telling everyone about your appointment. People are asking why we didn't mention it, why you're not here. Mom and I don't know what to say. Please call us back so we can figure out what's going on." I reached out and deleted the message. The sound of his voice faded into digital oblivion. And I felt better. Much better. At 10:04 p.m., a message arrived from an unfamiliar number, but I already knew who it was. "Judge Martinez, this is Harold Brennan. I hope I haven't overstepped the mark. Your father seemed genuinely shocked to learn of your position. Perhaps I was overly blunt in my delivery, but watching him brag about Marcus, unaware that his daughter was sitting in federal court, was more than I could bear. I hope you'll forgive the intrusion. GB." I watched those words. He had kept his word. He had orchestrated my little, perfectly timed apocalypse. And I felt not triumph, but a strange, chilling calm. I replied, "Judge Brennan, no apology is necessary. You told the truth. What they do with it is their choice. Thank you for your honesty." The rest of the evening passed in blessed, absolute silence. I finished my wine and watched a documentary about deep-sea fish, their blind, ghostly bodies flickering against the dark screen. I went to bed early and slept soundly, dreamlessly. Sunday morning greeted me with 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. I brewed strong coffee in my French press, sat down on a kitchen chair, and methodically read through them all. "Marcus, we need to talk. Seriously. Everyone at the party was asking about you. We didn't know what to say. Marcus, why didn't you tell us properly? Marcus? Dad?" Judge Brennan showed everyone the article from the National Law Journal, the one about 40 under 40 legal minds. "You were in it. Why don't you share this with your family?" Marcus, Brennan asked me in front of the entire prosecution team why I didn't mention that my sister is the judge in my case. I look like an idiot. I put my phone away, put on my sneakers, and went for a run. The cold Sunday air stung my lungs. I ran fast until my muscles burned and my thoughts turned into white noise. When I got home, I found a voicemail from my mother. I played it while stretching on the living room floor. "Sophia, honey, we need to understand what happened. Judge Brennan is implying that we weren't paying attention, but you never told us you were a judge. You said you worked for the government, doing legal work. How were we supposed to know this was so important? Please call us back. People are asking questions, and we don't have answers." The tone was hurt, almost reproachful. They were awkward. They needed answers. I deleted the message. Around noon, the doorbell rang. I glanced at the security camera screen. Marcus, not wearing a suit, in a simple jacket, his face gray with exhaustion. He held 2 paper cups in his hands. I sighed. This conversation was bound to happen sooner or later. I opened the door. "I hope these are grande oat lattes," I said evenly. "These are the ones." He handed me one. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside. We sat in the living room, facing each other. He looked like he hadn't slept all night. "That was the worst night of my professional life," he blurted out, his head bowed. "I can imagine," I said, sipping my coffee. It was the perfect temperature. Brennan cornered Dad right after the toast, right at the microphone. I asked him in front of everyone why the daughter of the man of the hour, a Senate-confirmed federal district judge, was absent from a party celebrating, quote, "the family's legal accomplishments," in front of 50 people. "What did Dad say?" My voice didn't waver. "He said you worked in state legal administration." Brennan asked if state legal administration meant a federal judicial position. Dad started stumbling, and then Brennan took out his phone. He showed everyone the transcript of your hearing on the screen, the profile in the journal. It was prepared, Sophia. "I can imagine," I repeated. "Mom tried to say something about you never telling them." Brennan looked at her and asked, "When was the last time you asked your daughter about her work? Not just assumed, but actually asked." Marcus put down his half-finished coffee, his hands shaking slightly. Sophia, I couldn't answer him, because I honestly don't remember ever asking you about your career. Really.
I didn't ask, I confirmed, simply stating a fact.
Why didn't you insist? Why didn't you make us pay attention? There was a hint of anger in his voice, but directed, I realized, at himself.
I leaned back in my chair. Because I'm tired, Marcus. Tired to the bone. Tired of fighting for crumbs of recognition. Tired of my victories being called a stable job with good benefits. It would have been easier to let go, to let you live in your world, where there's only one brilliant lawyer in the family, and for me to build my own life. But you see what the point is? An achievement like becoming a federal judge, it should have meant something to you in and of itself, without me rubbing it in your face. The fact that it took Judge Brennan, a stranger, to stage this circus and make you see it only proves how right I was. You didn't deceive him, Marcus said quietly. You simply told the truth. After he assumed I was a paralegal, I could have corrected him right then and there. I chose not to. Why? His gaze was filled with agonized confusion. Because I wanted to see if any of you would figure it out, if any of you would be willing to look beyond the facade of your own comfortable assumptions. I paused, letting the words sink in. You told Brennan you had no siblings. Marcus winced as if he'd been struck. No. I mean, I mentioned you once, but... You erased me, Marcus. You told the man who oversees your career that you were the only child worth mentioning, because acknowledging my career would have complicated your beautiful narrative, the narrative of you as the brilliant, self-sufficient son who lifted the family into the legal elite. It's unfair, he whispered, but there was no sparkle in his eyes. Isn't it? You built your professional identity on that, on you being your primary, sole achievement. Having a sister who's a federal judge would destroy that myth. I didn't know you were a federal judge, he shouted, and it sounded like a desperate excuse. I gave him a long, hard look. You didn't know because you never asked. I told you at Thanksgiving 2021. You steered the conversation toward your new office. I mentioned it at Easter 2022. Dad asked if government employees had good dental insurance. I exhaled. After that, I stopped trying. It was energetically unproductive. Marcus stood up as if the chair had burned him and paced my living room, his shadow flickering across the walls. What do you want from me, Sophia? An apology? Please. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I wasn't paying attention. I'm sorry I let my ego get between me and knowing my sister. His words came out strangled, as if he were choking on them. I don't need apologies, Marcus, I said quietly, looking at his back. They're cheap. I want you to understand. Your success and mine, they're not in competition. They never were. But you, Dad, Mom, you made them competition. The only ones worthy of attention. You needed to be successful, brilliant, the only one. And so I had to be unnoticed, a quiet background. It was the role I was given, and one that at some point I simply stopped challenging. He turned around, his face contorted with pain. So you just left. I gave in. No, my voice sounded firmer than I expected. I didn't leave. I built a career, so solid, so undeniable, that in the end, the truth couldn't take it anymore and came out on its own. I didn't beg you to see me. I stopped doing that. And that's not the same thing. He sank heavily onto the sofa, as if he'd been knocked down. His head fell into his hands. Brennan, he tore me to pieces within 20 minutes of the guests leaving. Only the team remained. He said I'd misrepresented my background, that professional integrity begins with being truthful about one's family, not just the facts of the case. He's right, I said simply. We judge people not only by their actions, but also by how they handle the truth about themselves. He also said that you're one of the finest legal minds he's seen in the last decade, that your courtroom management is exemplary, that you'll become a pillar of this county. Very generous of him, I responded, but something inside me twitched, warmed. This admission, though it came in a roundabout way, meant something. Is it true?
He looked up at me, and there wasn't malice in his eyes, but genuine, agonizing curiosity. "I'm good at my job, Marcus, just as you're good at yours. But you're better than just good. You're an exceptional prosecutor, and I never realized how much because you never gave me a chance to look, and you never looked at me." The silence that followed these words was thick, but not hostile. It was filled with sadness and the realization of something irretrievably lost. Finally, he exhaled. "The trial, doesn't it seem strange to you that I'm prosecuting a case in your courtroom?" "No, in that courtroom, you are Assistant U.S. Attorney Marcus Chin, and I am Judge Sophia Martinez. Our family history has nothing to do with the law. This is sacred space, and we both respect that. Brennan said you could excuse yourself, that the majority would do so to avoid even a shadow of a doubt." "I considered that option," I admitted, "but we're not close enough for there to be any real basis for bias. A recusal would be a safe, convenient option, but not necessary. Are you going to judge fairly?" "I will judge according to the law and the facts," I said, my voice sounding the way it does on the bench. "If your case is strong, you win. If the defense presents a more compelling argument, they win. That's how it works. And if you make a mistake, I will rule against you, without hesitation. Because in courtroom 7A, you're not my brother. You're a representative of the other party, bound by the rules." Marcus nodded slowly, accepting these conditions, these new, clear boundaries. "I can accept that." "Okay." He stood up to leave, reached for the door handle, but paused. He turned around. His face in the dim hallway seemed young and lost. "Honestly, I'm proud of you. I should have said this. Hell, I should have seen this years ago." The words hung in the air. They didn't undo the past, but they were there. "You're saying it now. That's something," I said. "Is that enough?" His voice held a hint of hope mixed with fear. I looked at him, this brilliant, broken man, my brother. "I don't know yet. Ask me after the trial." The trial continued for another 3 weeks. 3 weeks of tense, exhausting days. Marcus presented the case with a brilliance and composure that, now that the fog had lifted, I could appreciate. The defense fought desperately, but the evidence was ironclad. When the jury retired to deliberate, the air in the courtroom thickened. 6 hours later, they returned. Guilty verdict on all counts. Judge Brennan was present when the verdict was read. After the courtroom emptied, he approached the bench where I still sat, feeling a strange emptiness after the long battle. "Judge Martinez, exemplary work. This trial will be studied in law schools as an example of flawless legal proceedings." "Thank you, Judge Brennan. Your brother performed admirably, but you maintained perfect balance and control. That's a far more difficult task. You didn't allow the law to drown in drama. I appreciate your words." "I'm hosting a dinner next month. Several federal judges, leading appellate lawyers. I would be honored if you attended as my personal guest." An invitation. Not as Marcus Chin's sister, as Judge Sophia Martinez. "My pleasure," I replied. He smiled, and something paternal flickered in his eyes. "And Sophia, frankly, I said something to your father at that ill-fated party. I told him his daughter would make legal history long after his accounting career was forgotten. I don't think he fully understood it then, but I meant it." After he left, I sat for a long time in the empty courtroom, bathed in the evening light. The silence was peaceful, complete. My phone vibrated in my judge's robe. "Dad, Mom and I would like to invite you to dinner to properly celebrate your appointment. We know we're 3 years late, but better late than never. Please." I stared at the message until the letters swam before my eyes. Then I typed a reply, feeling every keystroke. "Next Sunday, 7 p.m., I'll pick the restaurant. Will you be there?" "Dad, yes, of course. And Sophia, we're sorry. We had to see you." I exhaled. I sent, "See you Sunday." I chose a small, formal restaurant 3 blocks from the courthouse. Its walls were adorned not with abstract paintings, but with black and white photographs of landmark trials, historic legal moments, and portraits of judges. This was my space, my territory. They arrived earlier. Mom, Dad, Marcus, all nervous, dressed too smartly. We sat down, ordered, and exchanged tense, slippery remarks about the weather, about traffic. The tension hung over the table like a fog. Finally, Dad cleared his throat. Sophia, we owe you more than just an apology. I put my fork down. The ringing of my plate was too loud. You owe me the truth, Dad. Is that what you want? To learn about my career? Or just to feel better about missing it? To ease your conscience? Mom winced, her lips pressed together. That's cruel, Sophia. It's fair, I persisted. I'm not interested in feigned remorse. If you're here because Judge Brennan shamed you and you're embarrassed, we can end this dinner right now. But if you're genuinely curious, if you want to finally know who I am and what I've built over the years, then yes, I'm willing to share. Dad took a deep breath, his gaze falling on the Supreme Court photo on the wall, then back to me. I want to know, really. Not because Brennan shamed me, although, damn, he did, but because I spent 40 years building one career, and only now have I realized I have no idea what my daughter has built in half that time, and I'm ashamed of that ignorance. And then I began to talk. Not for praise, not for justification, just to finally be heard. About Yale and the scholarship I fought for night after night. About Judge Reynolds, who saw in me not just someone's daughter or sister, but a mind. About my years in the prosecutor's office. About cases that kept me awake at night. About triumphs I celebrated alone. About the nomination. About the hearings where I was alone. About what it means to bear this burden and this honor every day. Marcus listened silently, his gaze fixed on me. At one point, he quietly said, "The Castellano case, your jury instructions. We reviewed them yesterday as a team. They will be cited for years to come. They are impeccable." I met his gaze, and for the first time in many years, saw no trace of condescension or competition in it. Only respect. Good. That's how the law should work. We learn from each other, even if it took 30 years and the intervention of an outside judge to learn that lesson. My mother asked. Uneasy, with effort, as if learning a new language. She asked about my daily life, how the day begins, the feeling of the robe on my shoulders, the weight of the decisions that weigh on my soul by the end of the week. Dad listened, his eyebrow raised in surprise, as if he'd realized for the first time that his daughter had more than just a job, but a whole universe of responsibility. These were real questions, and I was finally giving them real answers, unvarnished, but also not condensed out of resentment. Dinner stretched on for 3 hours. As we stepped out into the cool evening air, Dad took me by the elbow, holding me at the door. "I told everyone at work about you this week," he said, his voice carrying a strange combination of shame and a new, unfamiliar pride. "I showed you the National Law Journal article. I printed out the Senate confirmation report. I've been bragging about you for days." "That's sweet, Dad," I said, and the words weren't cutting. They were simply a statement. "I know it doesn't make up for what I missed the first time, but I want you to know I'm proud of you, incredibly proud, not just of your rank, of your strength." "Thank you," I replied, and the lump in my throat forced me to lower my voice. "Can we do this again? Regular dinners, where we don't just eat, but talk, really?" I looked at his face, illuminated by the neon sign, and saw in him not the overbearing father of my childhood, but an older man afraid of missing out on something else. "I wouldn't mind," I agreed. Marcus walked me to the car, his hands stuffed in his pockets. "Brennan called me into his office on Friday," he began, looking off to the side. "He's recommending me for the special task force on a major securities fraud case. He said that working in your courtroom showed him I can handle high pressure without losing my integrity." "That's wonderful, Marcus. Truly," I said, and it was the honest truth. He also said that if I ever misrepresent or omit information about my family again, he'll personally destroy my career. He's very protective of you." I couldn't help but smile slightly. Judge Brennan believes in integrity as the cornerstone of the profession. I respect that about him. "Me too," Marcus quickly agreed. He paused, shifting from one foot to the other. "Sophia, I will try to be a better person, like a brother, like seeing you. I can't undo the past, but I can influence what happens next." I met his gaze and nodded. "That is all I ask." 6 months later, I was invited to speak at the annual Federal Judicial Conference. The topic was dry: maintaining impartiality in complex family dynamics. I agreed. My family was present, all 3 of them. They sat in the front row, sitting up straight as if they were taking a test. I spoke. I talked about procedure, about the law, about professional boundaries. But between the lines, in every example I gave, our story shone through. How I separated the personal from the professional. How silence in one sphere became the foundation for authority in another. After the speech, a young law student made his way toward me, his eyes shining. "Judge Martinez, that was incredible. Tell me, how did you manage to remain calm all those years when your own family didn't recognize your achievements? Didn't it eat away at me from the inside?" I considered his question. Years flashed before my mind's eye. The quiet Yale library, the empty stands at court hearings, the cold screen of my phone with a message about an uninvited party, and then the icy clarity of the courtroom. "I remained calm," I said slowly, "because I knew what my family didn't. Success, it doesn't require applause. It requires work. Pure, difficult, daily work. And if you do that work well enough, long enough, and honestly enough, the truth eventually reveals itself. It grows cramped in the darkness." "And what if they never found out?" he insisted. I smiled, feeling a strange, firm confidence that had settled within me over these months. Then I'd still be a federal judge, doing important work. Their recognition, it's nice, it warms me, but it doesn't make my work more or less valuable. Its value is in itself. The student nodded thoughtfully and disappeared into the crowd. Dad approached my desk. His eyes were moist. "That speech, Sophia, I had no idea. I had no idea how much we hurt you, all these years." "You didn't mean to hurt me, Dad. You just didn't see me," I said, and there was no bitterness in those words anymore, only a sad statement of fact. "But now we see," he whispered. "Yes," Mom agreed, coming over and awkwardly taking my hand. "We do, and we're not looking away anymore." Marcus joined us, nodding toward the other end of the room. "Judge Brennan is here. He wants to say hello." I spotted Brennan. He stood surrounded by his colleagues, but his gaze was fixed on us, on my small, finally reunited family. He had become more than a mentor. He had become a catalyst, a mirror held up to their blind eyes. "Judge Martinez," he said, approaching, his handshake firm, "you've made a wonderful speech. You'll inspire a generation." "Thank you for being here," I said, the gratitude in my voice sincere and profound. "I wouldn't miss it. You know, I tell this story at every conference I attend, about a young prosecutor who was prosecuting a case before his own sister, the judge, without even realizing it. About a family so blinded by the brilliance of one that they overlooked the diamond in the rough." "For what purpose?" I asked, though I already guessed the answer. "To remind us all," his voice grew quieter but more weighty, "that competence doesn't shout about itself, that sometimes the most extraordinary people in our lives hide in plain sight. And they're not waiting for applause, but simply a genuine, attentive look." I glanced at mine. Dad, Mom, Marcus. They were looking at me, not as if I were some quiet Sophia, not as if I were a problem, but as if I were someone whose inner universe they were only just beginning to explore. With amazement, with timidity, but they were looking. "They're looking now," I told Brennan. "Yes," he agreed, "they're looking. But, Sophia, they're looking because I made them. And what happens when you force people to see you instead of letting them discover you themselves?" I glanced at my parents' faces. at the confused determination in my brother's eyes. They either get offended and retreat, or they learn. Time will tell, but I'm betting on learning. My family, they weren't cruel. They were just self-absorbed. Their own narrative. "A big difference?" he asked softly. "A huge difference," I answered without a shadow of a doubt. Cruel people don't change. Self-absorbed, they can learn to look outward, especially when the price of not paying attention is the realization you almost lost someone extraordinary forever. Later, back in my quiet office, I sat in the dark and Brennan's words resonated with me. He was right. They saw me because he held a torch to their blindness, and I accepted their inattention as a given. I built my fortress in silence and waited for the siege to end on its own. Was this weakness or wisdom? Humble acceptance or the most brazen form of pride? Pride that needs no validation. I didn't have a definitive answer, but I had what I'd built with my own hands. A career that was making a difference, a reputation that preceded me. And now, finally, I had this fragile, new version of a family. Not because I'd pounded on their doors screaming, "Look at me!" but because someone respected by the outside world had pointed a finger and said, "Did you see this?" Judge Harold Brennan believed I'd be remembered in law textbooks. My parents feared I'd embarrass them on the club's doorstep. The truth, as so often happens, lay somewhere in between. And yet, somewhere else entirely. I was Sophia Martinez. A federal judge, I built a legacy, case after case. And now, looking back on the journey, I realized the work always mattered, regardless of whether it had witnesses. But I must admit, it's better with witnesses, especially when those witnesses finally open their eyes and begin to truly see.